Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kristin. I'm the enterprise editor here at The Sun. Welcome to our second of 5 city election debates. We have 3 for the city council candidates and 2 for school committee. This is the first one for school committee. Tonight we have incumbent Alison Laraba, incumbent Connie Martin, and challengers Kristin Ross-Sitcawich and Kim Scott, no relation. We're here for 60 minutes, and I would like to remind all of you to make sure you vote on November 8th. And without further ado, we'll ask the candidates some questions, and we look forward to hearing their response. Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon.
So, Alison, we'll start with you, and then we'll just go around the table in alphabetical order, okay? Since Friday, since my colleague Jen Myers wrote a story about the UTL and the 3% raise, there's been a flurry of activity and a flurry of information and accusations. What's your reaction to everything that's happened in regard to that? And do you think that negotiations with public school teachers should be held in open session?
My first reaction was disappointment that something had leaked out, and very saddened that we've gotten ourselves in another situation where the public is kind of looking at us and we have a black eye. In terms of open negotiations, I've publicly said that we do need to look at the way we do negotiations. I wouldn't be adverse to doing them out in public. I also discussed possibly doing a professional negotiator. I'm not sure that that's really the way to go because a professional negotiator wouldn't have the same investment that perhaps the school committee, not perhaps, but that the school committee would have in the outcome of the contract talks. So I'm willing to look at it. I'm just not willing to say, yes, it's professional negotiator or it's all open session. I'd like to be able to work with both sides and do periodic reports.
Okay, right at 60 seconds. Thank you. Connie?
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to be that good with the timing. And I think I can echo a lot of the same thoughts. I think it's done a real disservice to the process. Ms. Doherty's actions, I think, really put the school committee, which is the least of my worries, but more importantly, district, in a very difficult position to try and now maintain the level of professionalism that's been in place for certainly my many years on this committee. I think we can all posit different ideas of new structures and new ways to do things. This committee has, considered that. We've thrown it open. I can remember when Mayor Caulfield was the mayor for the school committee several years ago when we were last going through negotiations. We had brought up, and during the course of one of our conversations on the floor, the idea of doing, kind of having our negotiations and reporting out to the public periodically so that we would be able to have a more public process. And I was a very strong supporter of that. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make that happen. So I think that, we're open to new ideas, but at the end of the day, you don't get to change the rules in the middle because you don't like the way things are going. And I think that has been a real blow for our ability to be effective.
Thank you, Connie. Kim?
I also was disappointed with Jackie's actions that she took. It did make me question what made it get to that point for Jackie. I think it seriously is a push towards open negotiations at this point in time. It actually, and it came forward on both sides that Mr. Georges had been disclosing information, which is equally troubling to me. We push for a private negotiation, and then both sides use the public when it's to their advantage, and that has to end. So I would be in favor of open negotiations.
You would, okay. Kristin?
Well, I was disappointed by the fact that that trust was breached. Certainly, those negotiations, as it had been, as they had begun, were done in private. But I am completely in favor of doing it out in the open, and I understand that can be rather difficult in negotiating that with the union just to get it out in public. So, yeah, in that vein, I echo really the very similar sentiments as my colleagues.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's just talk about this just for a minute. Alison, you said it was a black eye for the school committee, and I think you said you were saddened. Connie, you said it was a disservice. Just to play the devil's advocate for a minute, you people are literally, and the UTL too, you know, you're bartering with the taxpayers' money. So even though this didn't go according to script, and as they have since the open meeting law was passed and collective bargaining, is it that bad that some of the details here leaked out from both Paul's side and from Jack, you know, from the UTL side, and from Jackie on behalf of the school?
I mean, I think when you take an oath of office, and I think when you understand the rules, it is a big deal. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can say, you know, the harkening back to what Mr. Georges has done, he doesn't answer to the electorate. And if the government official and if the public official if we can't hold ourselves to a higher standard, then we really have no business being in these positions. We serve the citizens of this city. That's who our responsibility is to. That's the constituency that we serve. And I think it's absolutely inappropriate to breach that trust, to breach that good faith that the citizens have placed on us. What any union official or anyone else chooses to do, it's not our job to police that. We police ourselves, and we're responsible for ourselves and the choices that we make.
Connie, these Kim and Kristin both said they'd be open to negotiations and open. Alison, I think you said you'd be kind of...
Consider it.
You'll consider it. I'm not sure we got anything from you on that.
Well, as I said, I mean, we talked about the idea of doing our negotiations.
Okay, but how do you feel about
periodic announcements? I've been asked on the radio, I've been asked a number of times, I'll negotiate in public anytime. I'll negotiate on a street corner. The reality is that it's not going to be effective if the union isn't willing to do it.
Right.
It takes two sides to make this happen. If there was a change in leadership, if there was a change in approach from the union, I'm all for doing it in public. But I think that I've recognized that hasn't been an option open to us.
Okay, fair enough. We can move on now. Now I'm going to pick questions out of my fishbowl here, arbitrarily. Okay.
It's a very high-tech system.
You folks are familiar with some of these questions because you've answered them for the survey for lowellsun.com. So here we just arbitrarily, ladies. Okay. And we'll just
arbitrarily.
and we'll just continue. We'll continue in alphabetical order. Okay. Is the city of Lowell properly funding its share of the Lowell public school budget? Has the state failed to properly fund urban schools? Alison?
I think it's well known that for several years the city did not fulfill its basic obligations to the school district. In the last couple of years they have. My concern with that, and while I'm grateful that they're doing it now, my concern is that the number of years that they didn't really ended up eating into the foundation of the monies that we did have. In terms of the state, yes, I think they should be giving us the money that we need to keep not just going, but expand. I mean, we're talking about a large number of children from homes that don't have that extra money to give them enrichment programs or give them special schooling. It's on us, and it behooves us to do that job because that's our future. That's our future workforce. That's our future, hopefully, leaders. It's what we need to be doing.
Okay, Connie?
I think that there are certainly a lot of competing priorities in our city, in our state, in our nation. I think that the support that we've seen from the city, particularly in these last few years, has been appropriate given the constraints that they're under. I really do appreciate that when we look at the funds that have come in from the work of the delegation at the state level, Chapter 70 funding, not enough. I mean, I don't pretend it's enough. But I do think it represents a real effort on the part of our delegation and on the city to fund us at the highest level possible. And I think the responsibility to us is to make sure that every single day we're spending that money wisely so that we can point to it and say, yes, you should give us more because look what we can do with it. Look how conscientious and careful we are with the taxpayers' dollars that you give us to spend in this endeavor.
Kim?
I do think at this time that the city is funding us at an appropriate level. In the economy with so many people out of work, I don't think taxpayers have the appetite right now to support higher taxes for the schools. I do think over years, like Alison said, when they were underfunding, that we're still trying to make up for it, especially in technology, On the state level, I would like to see more funding for technology for urban districts. I think we're at a great disadvantage compared to our suburban areas, Burlington giving tablets for their kids. So I'd like to see more money on that front. That's it.
Okay. Kristin?
Well, the town of Burlington has a tremendous commercial tax base, so they can afford to give their kids tablets. I would love to see more funding come in from our federal and state resources. I do think that at the local level that we're appropriately funding at this point in time. Again, given the everyone's constraints in this economy, I think that's a really tough ask to go and ask our residents for more money for our school system. However, were we to ask them for more money, I think we need to be much more pointed as to exactly what that money is going to be spent on, whether it be a technology investment, some kind of infrastructure development is tangible, and you can see the outcome. And it really, quite frankly, the school system as a whole needs to be sold better to our community members. The school system is very isolated from the rest of the community. Doing door to door, the issues by and large are city issues. They're not school issues, and we really need to do better at marrying that with the city side of things.
Let's just talk about technology for a minute. You mentioned tablets. The devices that come out now these days are just, they're obsolete in a week. They're constantly being upgraded. They're being thinned. Is buying tablets for, say, Lowell High School students really something significant, or do you really think that that's something that should happen, or is it just the classroom instruction and the school experience? I mean, tablets in the high school might sound kind of cool, but what do you think? Do the kids in public schools really need an iPad? Yeah.
An iPad?
Yeah.
Well, we actually had a conversation not too long ago about the possibility of converting the textbooks, the heavy ones, to downloadable text. And the conversation at that time was that given the text that we use, they haven't caught up with the technology. So if you had that reasoning that you could save on the textbook costs and have each student have a tablet and have access to a textbook that's not ripped, torn, smeared, I would think that would be a great idea, because instead of spending money on textbooks that go out of date quickly but you hold on to for a number of years because they're just too expensive to keep turning over, versus a tablet where you could download the next one, I think that would be a great idea. But at this particular point in time, if we're not able to download the materials that we need, then no, I think we could do a better job with making sure that we have the computers in class that we need for the programs, to utilize the smart boards in a much better fashion, to even have our computer labs be more complete.
Connie?
I think that technology certainly does run at an incredibly fast rate. And I think that one of the key things that we're looking to do right now is to do this kind of comprehensive technology audit across the district, to find out exactly where the holes are. We know they're there. To find out where they are and where we can make the most strategic investments. A key part of that is professional development. You can have all the bells and whistles in the world. Computers don't teach kids. You need to have the staff, and you need to have the appropriately trained staff to use those tools. They're just like any other tool in the arsenal of trying to, for any classroom teacher. I think that, I'm more kind of leaning towards a lot more web-based resources as opposed to the actual hardcore hardware purchases, whether it's a tablet or a desktop or whatever. Because I think ensuring that we have appropriate hardware that allows us then to access what is, just incredibly broad in terms of curriculum and opportunities and research and all that. Sticking with a web-based system, gives us more flexibility, and it doesn't tie you into
Well, I agree with Alison as far as the tablets. It would have to be a cost analysis to see if they were worth it at this point in time. They are a tool. They don't make kids smart. It's just a piece of technology. Right? Exactly. But as far as having them, I think that we can't miss the factor too that kids learn differently now. And the interactive learning style that you get with like a smart board, the grab and move the planets and the whole, experience that goes along with that. And I do think they're wired differently, and that we have to remember that when we think about technology going forward.
Okay. And Kristin?
Okay. Well, technology changes at the flick of a switch these days. You just purchased, iPod 4, and iPod 5 is out the next month.
Yep.
So, going back to the risk of having obsolete equipment within a very short span of time is really it's a serious issue, particularly when you throw in millions of dollars at it. Using a web-based curriculum, using more web-based resources certainly is advantageous. It's timely. It's updated in a matter of seconds. So I would go in that direction. So that's where I'm at on that.
Okay, thank you, ladies. We'll go back to our trustee Fishbowl for another question.
Advantage of being last. Stop stealing my comment.
There's been a lot written. There's been, ladies, please, let's stay focused. There's been a lot written over the last few years about MCAS tests and our schools, public schools, teaching for the MCAS test. A school department gets a better result, they might get more funding. So with that as a backdrop, do you believe in standardized testing like the MCAS? Why or why not?
I think absolutely that standardized testing has a place in education. It's a even playing field for all the students to show what they know and what they don't know. It does reflect on what's being taught in the classroom. Do you run the risk of some teachers teaching to the test? Yes, but that's why you have things in place to make sure that people are not teaching to a test, that they have a full curriculum. We have the Common Core coming out that will broaden what we're teaching our students. But I think it's a legitimate resource to see how our children are progressing.
Okay, thank you. Connie? Now remember, 1 minute.
I told you I'd be really bad at that. For the most part, certainly we can focus on MCAS because it really is here in Massachusetts. It's the key, it's the key benchmark that we all use. I think particularly in Lowell it has been incredibly helpful in helping us really gauge, not necessarily individual students, but helping us gauge what's working in our district, whether it's at the school-based level or at the classroom level. It really has been a huge benefit of allowing us to make those kinds of comparisons. We have a very different student population that has to be taken into account, but there's been some critically important information that's come to us because of MCAS.
Like what? Like what?
Well, I think it's allowed us to understand where we've had holes, when we've had to make changes in our math curriculum. That was made about 6-7 years ago, and it was made as a direct result of failing math scores, where we weren't seeing any movement. Bringing in a new curriculum, training our staff to implement it, made a huge difference. That's where we've seen, some real critically important improvements in terms of mathematics. I also think, though, we need to be able to balance not just our MCAS results, we need nationally normed tests as well that allow us to take a broader view and allow us to place our school in terms of Massachusetts and then in terms of the nation.
Thank you. Kim?
MCAS obviously is a reality here in Massachusetts. I'm not in favor of MCAS testing. I do not mind as much the growth testing, the growth part of MCAS. I think it puts us as a disadvantage as an urban district when they tie, funding to MCAS results. I also think that it puts us at a disadvantage with our teaching staff wanting to work in the city.
And how does it, how does it work as a disadvantage for teachers?
In the city?
Yeah.
That they have to meet certain test results
Oh, I see what you
for
mean.
the
Okay.
MCAS.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And some of them are pretty unrealistic. I mean, MCAS is a good thing if it was, informed curriculum. But when it's to hold people accountable, instead of having high teacher evaluation standards, to me that would be a much more efficient way to do it.
Thank you. Kristin?
Well, certainly MCAS has its advantages and disadvantages. I see it in my own children. They'll spend weeks prepping for their MCAS exams, and they get to their exams and their teachers tell them that they're not to take certain portions because they didn't cover that, which I found to be rather interesting. And in one instance, it was an area of science. So, and that was supposed to be the standard for 5th grade, and they hadn't learned that at that time. So I found that to be surprising. I do think it's unrealistic to hold all of our teachers accountable for the scores that our kids achieve, whether they be proficient or non-proficient. Again, to echo my colleagues, you have a very diverse school district, a lot of children with learning disabilities, with language issues, so every kid learns differently. You're wrapping me up.
I am.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, next question, ladies. In your role as a school committee member, do you see yourself as more of an educator, an administrator, or something else? Alison?
I actually see us as the board, that we are the board of the district, and we work through...
Like a board of trustees?
Yeah. And that we work through the superintendent in terms of supporting the district, informing the district, and moving the district based on goals that we come up with as a group, and working, again, with the superintendent. I've never thought of us as belonging in the school level, saying you need to make this change, that change, but those conversations do come up. So sometimes you're walking a very fine line, but I truly try to keep that in mind when we are on the floor discussing any kind of motion or any kind of report that's coming through.
Thank you. Connie?
I certainly don't see us as educators. I think that our role really is administrative. It's to a certain extent supervisory in terms of our relationship with the superintendent. And I think really the balancing act for all of us is maintaining that big picture view of the district while still remembering that in every classroom, at every desk, there's a child whose education is really tied to the decisions we make in that room up in City Hall. So you really have to balance those, and make sure you have both of those perspectives for every decision that we make.
Great, thanks.
That was kind of short.
That was good. You know what? Yeah.
I know, really.
Obviously not an educator. Ditto. I think we have to change the order that we're going in so we don't repeat each other.
Yeah, we'll get you guys mixed up.
I think we have to be mindful of our role as a school committee, and keep our 3 duties as priorities, keeping residents' best interest in mind.
Okay. Kristin?
Well, I serve on many boards, so I see the role of a school committee member as a board member, as a trustee, and really keeping an eye on the big picture. Again, looking forward, how our school district will progress, and that's where I stand on that.
There's as a follow-up to this question, there's been a little turbulence in the Lowell School Department about school committee members visiting schools without first checking with the principal or whoever might be in charge that day. What's your view on a school committee member going into a school, whether it's just to take a walkthrough, to observe, or maybe talk to a teacher? Does that school committee member need to follow strict protocol and get approval from the principal? Or do you think the school committee, in its role as a board member, as the board of trustees, should have that leeway? Alison?
Anytime that I've gone to visit a school, I've actually gone through the superintendent to let her know.
The superintendent? Okay.
Yeah, because she's the one that reports directly to us. So I've always given the phone call to the superintendent and said, I'd like to visit so-and-so. They've never said no, but to me that is the proper format, because she is the one that reports directly to us. And then I leave it to her to bring that down to the school level to let them know, and just ensure that I'm not walking in the middle of an evacuation drill or something like that, or coming in on MCAS, because it can be a distraction, because of course the principal or the assistant principal wants to make sure that they're available for any questions. I really don't want to have one person walking around the hallways, even if they do have their little visitor badge in this day and age.
Okay. Connie?
That's actually the established protocol, is going through the superintendent's office to make a request, and then attending going basically on the schedule so that the school is aware of it, and that's been in place for quite a while.
Okay. Kim?
I agree. I don't think it's the school committee member's place to walk into a building unannounced. That's the superintendent's job to do. She reports to us. If there's a problem in the school that she's not attending to, then that's our responsibility to deal with her. I do think it's good for school committee members to reach out to the community. As I'm an involved parent in the PTO and the Citywide Parent Council, I think it would be nice to see school committee members at things like spaghetti suppers, scholarship drives, things like that, but being mindful that it's an extremely crazy, hectic schedule, so that might only be once a year, but I think parents would appreciate that.
And Kristin?
Last but not least, okay, I think it's just plain old common courtesy. You know, as an administrator in a school, you know, if your board is coming in to check you out, you want to be prepared and want to shine your school in the best possible light. And again, be available for questions and to do facility tours and whatnot. Nobody likes surprises. And yeah, and it would be nice to have school committee members more involved in our, you know, parent and child activities.
And just as a follow-up to that, the
Sure.
parents are incredibly welcoming and sometimes surprised to see you.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I'm not sure all of you have children. I think most of you do. First of all, have all of you attended public schools?
Yes.
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 Okay. And Connie, you don't have
No,
children,
I
right?
don't.
Okay, so I'll just direct this. Do your children attend public
My
schools?
son Matthew is a senior at the Latin Lyceum at Old High School.
Oh,
He has
okay.
gone through the entire, he went to the Riley, the Sullivan, and on up to the high school.
Well, we could touch on the Latin Lyceum later on. How about you, Kim?
I have a first and a second grader at the Fine Arts School, public school.
Okay. And did you attend public schools yourself?
I did.
Mm-hmm. And
I
Kristin?
have a 5th and 6th grader at the Daily Middle School,
Okay.
and I did attend public school.
All
as
right.
well.
All right. That was an easy one.
And my answer wasn't the same.
Yeah, that's great,
They
right?
all have to be
I would say I
different
went to
time.
Lowell Public Schools. Is that anyone else?
Okay. Pardon me?
I went to Lowell Public Schools.
Because she wants
Thank
to
you
get
very
in on the
much.
conversation.
All right,
I
so
don't really.
here's another MCAS-related question. Do you support expanding MCAS testing to cover student competency in U.S. history?
Yes.
Why? Tell me why or why not.
Why? I again think it's a good benchmark to see what's happening in the classroom. It's a standardized test that is not being changed this way or that way depending on the classroom. It's a standardized test, and I think gives us good information of what's being taught in the classroom, what's being retained by the students, and again, where we need to fill in some holes or gaps.
Okay. Connie?
I support both. I think implementing the science first is the kind of the order that I would place those in. Certainly that's the one that's about to be implemented, so we're looking forward to that. I think getting a comprehensive view of performance across the district that, you know, in these two critical subject areas will be a huge benefit.
Okay. Kim?
Do not.
Oh, okay. Well, that's in
See
keeping with your
previous
earlier
answer.
answer.
I'm sorry?
That's in keeping with your
Yes,
earlier
yes,
answer
it
about
is.
MCAS.
Yes, it is.
So please elaborate.
I just worry with the MCAS, the process of the MCAS and whether or not it stifles creativity in the classroom. U.S. history was an exciting course to me. It was a class that I think different teachers taught it in very different ways. And I just worried, and I am in favor of standardized testing. It's just I don't like the format right now. So.
I would be in favor of expanding our MCAS to include U.S. history. I would rather prioritize science into our MCAS testing over U.S. history first. So, but you look at surveys periodically that come out, and they say who was the first president, and you get some crazy answers. And I think that's telling of our education system that is not placing a priority on learning about our U.S. history, and as a result, it's decreasing the level of civic involvement.
Mm-hmm. But is standardized testing the answer to that? Does standardized testing
Well, as
replace
part of standardized testing,
actual classroom
you
instruction?
have to teach, you have to provide that curriculum. If it's not part of your standardized testing, that's the first thing to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that your priority is based on whatever you're testing to. So if that's part of science or U.S. history is part of that, yeah, that would be great.
I think the key too, though, it really is a matter of our curriculum driving the MCAS. I mean, we have a Massachusetts state system of standards that start in every topic area, at every grade level, and it's been developed over the course of many, many years. MCAS draws from that, not the other way around. It's not a matter of developing a test and then backing into it. It's a matter of developing what those essential understandings are, going through the whole process of coming up with what English looks like or what literature looks like from kindergarten through the Lyceum. And then drawing from that to pull your questions. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of thing.
For the sake of fairness, Alison, do you want anything else to say on that?
I think one of the things to understand is our curriculum being used to model for the national standards, and I think that's very telling in terms of the programs that we have in Massachusetts.
All right. Fair enough. You've all been campaigning. I imagine you've been going door to door. Am I right? All right. If you knocked on a door and a parent said, "Hey, my son or daughter is not getting a solid education in the little schools. I'm upset about. I feel he's being left behind, and I tried speaking to the principal. I called the superintendent's office, and I'm not getting anything satisfactory in return." What would you tell that parent? How would you try to allay that parent's concerns?
I would get their information and say that I'd have a conversation with the superintendent to try to see where the follow-up needs to be. I think many parents, myself included, have often complained about the rigor of the classroom, and that's been an ongoing conversation. You can understand their frustration if the parent is saying to you, "I'm trying this, and that, and I'm not getting any satisfaction." Well, you have to be very careful about what you're asking, because there are privacy issues at stake. But if they're telling you something, then again you're going to the superintendent and saying, "I've heard from this parent, and what are we going to do about it?" And follow up on that part to make sure that we are at least having a conversation with the parent. You're not going to please everybody with your decisions, but at least make sure that the communication is there and that you're giving them the time to look at what the problem is and see what you can do to address it.
Thank you. Connie?
I think, one of the key things, I think for most parents that I've, who've contacted me with those kind of concerns, it has been a matter of most times reflecting back to the actual school site, that they haven't really exhausted those options yet. And I think as a school committee member, I've always looked at myself as kind of taking that advocacy position of helping them know who they should be talking to directly, and then helping them make those next connections up the food chain. That when there have certainly been situations where it really has risen to the level of the superintendent, and getting that individual involved. And I think that, you can't solve every problem, but we certainly have to listen and make the changes that are appropriate. And I think, again, that's that balancing act of understanding that each individual child is your charge too, and not just the big picture. So.
Okay, thank you. Kim?
Ditto, no. On the citywide parent council, we hand out a worksheet, and basically I would go back to that worksheet, which is making sure you went through the chain of command. So you're asking them, did you talk to the classroom teacher? Did you go to the principal, site council, administration, and then up to the school committee? And then at which point in time I would speak to the superintendent about the concerns and see where she stood on it. I'm sure Jean would address it.
Kristin?
Ditto. My goodness. Change this order. Okay. Now, I definitely, as a parent myself, I can certainly empathize with perhaps sometimes being frustrated with being able to connect with your chain of command. But again, more often than not, it winds up being that the parent needs to go back through that chain of command back to the individual school and run it up. And worksheet's a great idea, and would encourage parents to keep records so that as a backup, and because quite often that becomes an issue. And then obviously, if it rose to the level of the superintendent, then so be it. But we want to ensure that that child receives all the services and all the supports that they need.
All right. Now I'll go off script for a minute with a question, and if I get dittos on this, there's something seriously wrong. We've all been campaigning,
Ditto.
going door to door. What are you hearing from voters as it relates to the Lowell School Department and the Lowell School Committee?
There's a lot of frustration with parents and how we've conducted ourselves on certain matters. They certainly have a lot of opinions about decisions that have been made in the last year, decisions about budget and how we're going to handle this funding for this source or this funding for that source. I have heard comments about the departure of Dr. Scott and how we handled that. And it's just, they're frustrated. They're frustrated and they're expecting more of us.
Connie, I'll give you extra time.
We anticipate.
As it relates to Dr. Scott, and that's a question here somewhere too, but what are they telling you about that, for example?
That we should have been more open with information, more forthcoming about our reasons. And, it gets back into executive session and what you can say and what you can't say. It's very hard to look a parent in the face and say, it is what it is. To steal Jim Leary's comments. I've gone on record as saying that I thought we could have handled it differently. I thought we could have handled it better. When the decision was made by Dr. Scott to not continue negotiations, I truly feel we should have sat down and aired our concerns and said, okay, how are we doing this transition, instead of going back and forth the way we did in the paper.
Okay, great. Connie?
I think that
You have two
I have
minutes.
not had.
Yeah, she has two
thank you.
questions.
I haven't had that experience of parents remarking in that way to me. There may be reasons for that.
So are they telling you everything's great in the Lowell School
I,
Department?
really what the key things I've been hearing during this campaign have been about decisive decisions that have, there's a little, redundancy for you, that have been made in the last 6 months since July 1st that have made profound changes in school communities. Things that have lingered for many, many years, not been addressed, have finally been addressed. That's what I've been hearing about, from a number of different parents. Again, no one has approached me specifically about Dr. Scott except you guys. I think in my answer also I had said that, certainly could have been different. We didn't have a lot of options. The liabilities that were on us in terms of protecting the city and protecting the district, I think were handled particularly expertly because we're not in court right now. And I think that is something that the committee took great pains to ensure that we didn't lay ourselves open to a frivolous lawsuit or any kind of action against the district.
Kim, hold on. So are you guys dittoing each other on the handling of the
say
Dr.
no.
Scott matter?
I say no.
Yeah.
No.
Right, okay. Kim?
No ditto.
Because I was listening. So.
I've received a lot of different responses about the schools.
Well, enlighten us.
The Dr. Scott issue is certainly has arisen.
So Connie, obviously it's not just us.
I'm not
There's
saying it's
people in the
not. I am
community.
saying there could be very
I
valid
don't
reasons
think
why
it's
people
the
are not
majority.
approaching me about it.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So,
I don't
I
think
mean,
it's the
I-
majority of people either. It's out there, and I'm not saying it's the majority.
Yeah.
I mean, the majority of people, the majority don't have kids in the schools and didn't really care. In fairness, honesty.
Yeah, that's all right.
The next group cared about the budget and technology and how we were going to fund technology in the school. And then there was certainly the Dr. Scott and not liking the communication. And there were a lot of people that it wasn't even about Dr. Scott. It was about the communication that they received from the school committee.
If you had been on the committee, and Kristin, you can respond to this too, what would you have done differently or, on the whole Dr. Scott affair?
I really don't know, in all honesty. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know all the nuances that happened behind the closed door, so I really don't know how I would have handled it.
Do you wish you were still the superintendent?
No.
Why not?
I'm very happy with Jean Franco's communication with parents.
Was that lacking in the previous administration?
It was there, but I don't think I knew the level that it could be until Jean stepped in. I mean, I think she did a good job. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to come across that I don't think she did a good job. I'm just very happy with Jean Franco.
Okay, Kristin,
Okay. Well, we
you have a
can't-
couple minutes here.
Yeah, obviously, in like 5 questions now.
We're getting into it today. And no more dinner one.
What I've heard in my canvassing, we've canvassed well over 4,500 doors at this point, with a few more to go. So, a couple of different areas that people had expressed concern. One was around the Dr. Scott issue. It's a very small group. And they were more troubled by the fact that there wasn't a great deal of communication around it. They just couldn't understand why. And I found myself in the position of having to say, did you want to foot the bill for a lawsuit? No, I don't think we could afford that. So, there were conversations around that, and then there were other comments around how the committee conducted itself or has conducted itself. And then from a parent and student perspective, up in Belvedere, there were several families that had pulled their children out of public school and put them into private school this year because of issues at their two neighborhood schools.
Mm-hmm. What kind of issues?
They had expressed concerns around safety. They had expressed concerns around curriculum and test scores. So what became very clear to me was, okay, now you've got, say, 6 different families just in this one neighborhood alone that have pulled their children out of public school and put them into private school. That takes another $3,000 to $4,000 out of our economy. Essentially, that's disposable income. And now these families are talking about selling their homes and moving out of the city. To me, that's a big problem. Because when your school system is not up to par and or a really great success, you lose people to other communities. Why pay an extra $4,000 a year to send a kid to private school? So, and I actually am very pleased with Jean. I think the communication has been great. I've heard a lot of really great feedback from the community. For instance, there was a football player that was injured at a camp over the summer, and they received a phone call directly from Jean Franco, inquiring after their son's health. I thought, how fabulous! What fantastic customer service. And that, at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to.
And that's how she looks at it.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, thank you. Now, this is a question that I have from the official, but I'm just taking a few notes here. I'd like to just talk to you for a minute about school department expenses. When you look at the school department budget, how much of that budget actually goes to educating children? For example, when we think about the city budget, right? Like 80% of the city budget, or at least when I covered City Hall, was about 80%, is salaries and wages. Okay. That leaves very little money to take care of everything else. Infrastructure, roads, all that kind of stuff. So the question is very similar for the school department. How much of the school department budget is actually goes to Jimmy and Mary's books and pencils and blackboards and stuff like that? Or is it a figure like 80% goes to salaries and wages? And we know that for the top administrators in public school systems, those wages can be very high. Those salaries can be very high. Alison.
I'm going to have to be very frank with you and tell you I don't know what that percentage is. That's why I was asking for Jimmy Larry, because he would right off the top of your head. We do have a lot of costs and salary. We have infrastructure costs, but I could not honestly tell you.
What, Connie?
We're generally at about 85%, a little bit higher than the city in terms of kind of what we're spending on staff. That's not shocking. I mean, whereas it's a service delivery endeavor, so I mean that's where we're spending the bulk of our money is on people at every level. So that's my understanding of the percentage.
Kim?
We, as far as I understand, we're at about a similar split as the city. I thought it was 80-20, but it's right up there.
And Kristin?
80, yeah, I mean it's 85%. But
this is
what I found, I know, ditto. So what I find more concerning about that ratio of salary to resource is, we get our children's books home and they're disgusting. It's disrespectful. The resources that are provided to our children are disrespectful to them and to us as taxpayers. And it's in the same vein, and this is not to put anyone down, but at the same time we're negotiating deputy superintendent pay raises, contracts, and, you know, could we have used that money and actually bought adequate and timely materials for our kids for their classrooms? Absolutely. So that's why I think the priority is kind of off. That's just my opinion.
Right. You've expressed your opinion. So
Thank you.
What's your opinion, ladies, on that? We'll go counterclockwise this time. Do you agree with Kristin that the priorities are mixed up?
As
Connie.
Connie. I just thought of a coworker's name. I'm going to call you Gary. As Connie just mentioned, I mean, we're in a service industry. As far as textbooks, the district itself provides, I'm a finance person, right? The district itself provides the new textbooks in the district, all the new curriculum. So they'll provide the one-time shot at, we just provided all new science texts for third grade, beautiful new science books. The school-based budget handles your textbooks, your replacement textbooks. So if your child has bad textbooks in the school, then it means the book's been in circulation, maybe a history book or something for so long.
20 years.
That now, but now that school is responsible to pull it from their school site budget. So I don't know what their explanation is. For example, my children's school, we do not have old textbooks there. And if we did, we would go to the principal. Why aren't you buying new textbooks? Are you using your money because they split it and they can use it how they want? Professional development, textbooks, and supplies. Maybe her principal is buying extra paper and they're using a lot of photocopies in that building instead of replacing textbooks. But it's really a site-based issue.
Connie?
Well, I think the issue when you talk about, kind of making the comparisons with administrators, certainly, we have some people who are drawing, impressive salaries. They're also doing impressive work, and we wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be having these kinds of conversations about, the progress that we've seen if they weren't there. We've been very, I think, conscientious in terms of the way we've put people in place who I think have done extraordinary work. We've eliminated administrative positions when we've been able to. I mean, just in the last, not this past budget, but the budget before, we eliminated the assistant superintendent for personnel. That position went away. So, and that was because, it wasn't because we don't have personnel issues. And it wasn't because we're not still managing 1,200 people as staff people. So, there's still a real need there, but it was recognized that we needed to do more with less. That was one of the ways we did it. Comparisons that I've seen to other districts, we're not over the top. I mean, we really have far fewer administrators when you consider our size, obviously, doing this work, and it's critically important work.
I've been informed that it's closing statement time.
Oh, I
So-
want to get to answer the question.
Really?
Well,
Okay.
take a quick
Sorry.
crack at it,
Ditto.
Alison.
How's that? Ditto. So it's closing
Closing
statement time. And I'm supposed to look right at the camera?
Look right at the camera,
Oh,
please.
thank you. 2 years ago, I started on a journey to join the school committee and was very fortunate and humbled to be elected. I've spent the last 2 years trying to follow up on the promises that I made in that campaign, to be professional, to work with the collaboration. Some successes, some not successes. But in my mind, I still have things that I can bring to the table. There are still issues that we need to address, and we still need to move forward. And I think that I can be a part of that, and I respectfully ask for your vote on November 8th.
Thank you.
Connie?
My name is Connie Martin. I've served in my 12th year right now, serving on the Lowell School Committee. It's been an incredible honor for the citizens here in my hometown of Lowell to send me back a number of times. I hope they'll consider doing it again for this upcoming election. The work over these past 12 years has been challenging, and it's been important. The changes that have happened in our district have an impact, not just in the schoolroom, but throughout our city. The investments that we make in our school district pay dividends across our city, and the responsibility for all school committee members is to really kind of steward those investments and ensure that every dollar is spent smartly, and so that we get the biggest impact for it. Here in the city of Lowell, we can't make any kind of we can't give up. We need to keep fighting. Our students deserve it. Our city deserves it. And I do ask for your vote on November 8th so that I continue that fight.
Thank you. Kim?
Kim Scott, and I'm an involved parent. I have 2 young daughters in the Pine Arts Public School. I have a long-term investment ahead of me. I have a bachelor's degree in finance, and I feel I can bring fresh ideas to the school department, school committee. I feel that we're in need of fresh ideas. I will have the taxpayers' best interest at heart, the residents and the students.
You're up, Kristin.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, my name is Kristin Ross-Sitcawich, and my top 3 goals for, if you choose to elect me, is to obviously be very purposeful and responsible with the use of your tax dollars, using strategic management to ensure that our children are provided with the best resources possible in their classrooms, and also increase family and community partnerships. I feel that my experience in the community, I work with families every single day in my role as a Director of Homelessness Prevention and Home Ownership Programs and Community Teamwork. So I see things a little bit differently on the outside. I have 2 little girls in the system. Like Kim, I have a tremendous investment in my children, and I really would love the opportunity to not only advocate on their behalf, but also advocate on behalf of every child in the city. And I respectfully ask you for your vote on Election Day.
Thank you for tuning in tonight, and please tune in, click on lowsun.com tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock for our second debate featuring several city council candidates. And I'll be back with you on Friday night for the second school committee debate. Thank you and good night.